Yesterday, Sayadaw explained that in order to dispel and remove kilesa, defilements, one needs to practice systematically. Without practicing systematically, there is no way one can remove these kilesa, defilements. When kilesa, defilements are not suppressed, dispelled or uprooted, these defilements give a lot of trouble. Defilements give great trouble to the person who cannot remove these defilements. And thus, having kilesa, defilements, which are giving trouble to the person meets suffering and harm. The person who does not want to get suffering, they need to remove and dispel kilesa, defilements. What is the most important thing in order to dispel kilesa, defilements is that one should practice systematically so as to remove, extinguish the kilesa, defilements. One should practice the 3 trainings in order to dispel, extinguish and uproot the kilesa, defilements. And one should practice the certain training in order to dispel certain defilements. In order to avoid and refrain transgressive form of defilements, one should practice sila, morality. One should make a habit to refrain transgressive form of defilements that manifest in body and speech. One should practice morality in order to refrain from transgression. And in order to dispel obsessive form of defilements that can manifest in the mind, one should prevent and cure by practicing samadhi, concentration. Just as one needs to prevent illness from taking place, just as one needs to prevent fire before the fire breaks out, in the same way, one should prevent obsessive form of defilements by being mindful. Even if these defilements arise, one should remove these defilements right away by noting. In this way, one should prevent these defilements from arising, and if they arise, one should remove them right away by noting them. One should guard and protect by having mindfulness so that kilesa, defilements have no chance to arise. And when defilements arise, one should remove these defilements immediately by noting them. So just like one needs to prevent fire, and if the fire breaks out, one should extinguish the fire immediately. In the same way, one should prevent so that the defilements cannot arise, and when the defilements arise, one should remove these defilements right away by noting. Preventing, curing the defilements, one is a wise person. And in order to cure the priyuttana kilesa, obsessive form of defilements that manifest in the mind, one should have mental factors of viriya, sati and samadhi, effort, mindfulness and concentration. One should have samadhi sikha, one should have concentration training, concentration group of viriya, sati, samadhi, effort, mindfulness and concentration in order to prevent and cure obsessive defilements. It is called samapatipatti, practicing systematically. But latent or dormant form of defilements cannot be overcome by sila or samadhi, morality or concentration. Morality and concentration alone cannot overcome latent or dormant form of defilements. One should develop knowledge in order to overcome latent or dormant form of defilement. In order to develop knowledge, one should be mindful when dukkha satya, when the Dhamma that are the truth of suffering are arising, one should note them. It is said that dukkha pariññaya, one should discern the truth of suffering. One should discern the kind of Dhamma that are called dukkha. Without discerning dukkha, if one comes across desirable objects, there can be lust, greed, and not knowing dukkha as dukkha, there can be greed, lust arising. By developing knowledge, the defilements that can arise by lack of mindfulness has no chance to arise. So that's why by developing knowledge, one can overcome latent or dormant form of defilements. By noting the presently arising objects, based on the object that one is able to note effectively, one discerns mind and matter, cause and effect, and the characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self. By knowing the true nature of impermanent suffering and non-self clearly, kilesa defilements cannot arise. If there is not knowing, raga, lust can arise. But if one removes not knowing, lust cannot arise, and also other defilements does not have any chance to arise. So based on the object the person can note effectively, kilesa defilements cannot arise. Connecting with the object the person is noting effectively. By noting effectively, one discerns mind and matter, cause and effect, and the characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self. Removing ignorance, removing not knowing and knowing wrongly, there will no longer be craving. If one understands things as impermanent, one will no longer take them as permanent. By knowing that things are suffering, one will no longer take them as good or pleasant, but instead one sees things as unpleasant. And by knowing that things are arising in their own accord, one understands that there is no atta, there is no self involved. In this way, the person knows very clearly. Based on the object the person can note effectively, one develops knowledge, and thus one removes latent or dormant form of defilement. When it is said that the latent or dormant form of defilements are overcome, it is not overcoming totally, but one is overcoming latent or dormant form of defilements momentarily. By developing Vipassana knowledge, by developing insight knowledge, one is removing latent or dormant form of defilements momentarily at the moment one develops knowledge. By developing knowledge, one overcomes kilesa defilements that have been following throughout the round of existences. One removes them momentarily. By developing knowledge, one also weakens the latent or dormant form of defilements. Weakening the defilements by developing Vipassana knowledge, one finally attains Ariya Magga Jnana, path knowledge, which eradicates and uproots these latent dormant form of defilements to the point of no return. By developing Vipassana, one is weakening the kilesa defilements, one is removing the latent dormant defilements momentarily. But when one attains Ariya Magga, when one attains path knowledge, one totally eradicates the latent or dormant form of defilement. Sayadaw gives an example of a boxing match. In a boxing match, the player has to avoid blows from the opponent, and also the player has to take the opportunity to give the opponent a powerful blow. If the player can give the opponent a powerful blow, the opponent will be weakened by the powerful blow. And again, the player has to give the opponent more and more blows so that the opponent gets weaker and weaker. And finally, the player has to give a most powerful blow in order to knock out the opponent. When the player can knock out the opponent, then the player is the winner. So in the boxing match, the player has to look for opportunity in order to give the opponent powerful blows. And at the same time, the player has to avoid blows from the opponent. So the player has to give powerful blow and avoid blows from the opponent. And finally, when the opponent becomes weaker and weaker, and finally when the player gives the final blow to knock out the opponent, if the opponent is knocked out, then the player becomes a winner. So in the same way, Vipassana, insight knowledge, is weakening the kilesa defilements. And finally, when defilements become weaker and weaker, Ariya Magga, the path knowledge, totally eradicates the defilements to the point of no return. So it is the Ariya Magga, path knowledge, that uproots the kilesa defilements, so that defilements cannot arise. So by attaining Ariya Magga Jnana, by attaining path knowledge, certain kind of defilements are totally uprooted to the point of no return. In order to uproot these kilesa defilements, one should practice systematically, and one should practice the three trainings: Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom, in order to remove these gross, medium, and refined form of defilements. So when practicing Satipatthana meditation, yogi should not be expecting for Ariya Magga, path knowledge, to arise. If the yogi is expecting and longing for Ariya Magga path knowledge to arise during the practice, he/she will be taking time away from the practice. He/she will be wasting time. So during the practice, yogis should not be expecting path knowledge to arise, but yogi should be practicing mindfulness continuously without expecting anything. And yogi should be practicing sila, samadhi, prajna, morality, concentration, and wisdom in order to attain Ariya Magga Jnana. But one should not be expecting Ariya Magga Jnana. In order to develop Vipassana Jnana, one should practice systematically, and in order to practice systematically, one should listen to the guidance and instruction from the teacher, which is called Saddhamma Savana. The one who wants to play in a boxing match, he should practice before going for the match. The one who wants to get victory on a boxing match needs to practice to become the winner. The person has to practice under the guidance of the teacher how to avoid blows from the opponent and how to give powerful blow to the opponent. In order to compete in the boxing match, the person has to practice under the teacher. The person has to practice with the teacher for boxing. In the same way, when one has to face kilesa defilements, one should practice in order to avoid kilesa defilements. One should practice in order to prevent kilesa defilements from arising. And in order to have victory on these kilesa defilements, one should learn the correct method how to keep one's mind calm, collected, and unified. One should also learn how to keep the noting mind aimed towards the object of meditation, so that the noting mind will be face to face or direct with the object. When the yogi notes the object, aiming the noting mind towards the object and putting effort in the practice, then noting systematically, one's noting will become powerful. One will gain momentum in the practice. However, the truths such as dukkha satya, however they are difficult to be discerned because they are profound, one will discern the truth when one becomes skillful in the practice. One will discern the truth clearly and distinctly. And once noting becomes effective, one noting will be effective, and one develops knowledge, discerning the truth clearly. So just as the boxer has to practice in order to become the winner, in the same way, when the yogi, before the yogi goes into combat with the kilesa defilement, yogi should learn the correct method, how to give powerful blow to the defilements, so that defilements will become weaker and weaker. Yogi should also learn the correct method, how to avoid blows from the defilements. And at the same time, yogi should give powerful blow to the kilesa defilements, so that the defilements become weaker and weaker. As the yogi can give more and more powerful blows to the defilements, kilesa defilements become weaker and weaker, and finally the defilements can be totally uprooted when the yogi attains Ariya Magga Jnana, path knowledge. At least the person has to uproot the defilements that can lead the person to apaya, lower existences. So one should make it a point to uproot the defilements that can lead the person to lower existences. Buddha had given ways, Buddha had given method in order to prevent, uproot the kilesa defilements. And these methods can be learned by learning pariyatti, by learning the scriptures, by learning the teachings of the Buddha, in order to prevent, cure and uproot the kilesa defilements. Buddha had given the methods of sila, samadhi, panya, morality, concentration and wisdom, in order to uproot gross, medium and refined form of defilements. Yogi should be mindful on presently arising object. Every single second, yogi should be mindful every single second. And in order to practice systematically, there should be Saddhamma Savana. One should listen attentively on the guidance and instructions given by the teacher, given by the wise. In the word Saddhamma, there is the word Dhamma. Dhamma means the practice which can support, uplift, prevent, and help and uplift the practitioner. It is said that Dharititi Dhammo, Dhamma can support, uplift, prevent, uplift, support, help the practitioner, so that the practitioner will not be degraded or inferior. To whom does the Dhamma uplift, protect? It is the practitioner that the Dhamma uplifts, protects. The person who practices systematically according to the teaching is uplifted, protected by the Dhamma. How does the Dhamma support, protect, and uplift the person? It is said, Apadamane Rakhanto. It means that Dhamma protects so that the person will not fall to the lower existences. When a person is pulled down by the gravity of kilesa defilement, the person will fall into the lower existences. When the person is being pulled down by the kilesa defilement, the person will become inferior and degraded. When defilements arise in the mind is inferior. When the person still has latent and dormant form of defilements, the person is still inferior. By entertaining gross, medium and refined form, so that the person can fall into the lower existences. The Dhamma protects, uplifts and supports the person, so that the person, the practitioner, will not fall into the lower existences. What it means by lower existences is that Chatusu Apayesu. It means that when the person is reborn in hell or as an animal or as a ghost or hungry ghost, then the person is inferior. It is the low existences. In order that the person will not be reborn in lower existences, one should practice Sila, Samadhi, Panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom, so that the Dhamma can uplift, support, and protect the person from falling into the lower existences. By practicing, by performing wholesome deeds, such wholesome deeds can lead the person to be reborn as a human or a deva. By practicing jhana, the person can be reborn as a Brahma. But being reborn in future existences, if there is rebirth, bhava jati, then there is bound to be suffering such as old age, disease, and death. Being reborn in existences, even though the person does not want to grow old, one will grow old. Even though the person does not want to have disease or illnesses, the person will have illnesses. Even though the person does not want to die, there will be death. Rebirth can lead to suffering such as old age, disease, and death. Old age, disease, and death are inevitable to the person who has rebirth. So during bhavajati, during rebirth, there is rebirth linking consciousness, linking the old existence to the new existences. Patisandhi, or rebirth linking consciousness, lasts only a moment, and it is very subtle. Rebirth is not suffering itself. Rebirth linking consciousness is not suffering itself, but rebirth can lead to suffering such as old age, disease, and death. So rebirth can give results to old age, disease, and death, and thus rebirth is also taken as suffering, because it is based on rebirth that the person encounters suffering such as old age, disease, and death. When the person is reborn in future existences, the samsara, round of existences, will be prolonged, and there will be more sufferings of old age, disease, and death. Dhamma protects, uplifts, so that the practitioner will not stay in the samsara, round of existences, for long. And Dhamma uplifts, protects the person, so that the person will not fall into the lower existences. In this way, Dhamma uplifts, protects the practitioner, so that the practitioner will not fall into lower existences or stay in the samsara for long. So one should, the Dhamma uplifts and protects the practitioner, whoever practices systematically. So it is said that Attanan Dharante, the person who bears the Dhamma, it is explained as Yathanusita Pratipatsanti. One should practice as being taught, as being guided. The person who practices according to the guidance, the person who walks the path that has been guided, the person who practices systematically, is the person who bears the Dhamma. Buddha had given way how to practice sila, how to avoid kilesa defilements from arising, and Buddha also gave the way how to cure priyuttana kilesa, obsessive form of defilements, by practicing concentration. And Buddha gave method how to uproot anusaya kilesa, latent or dormant form of defilement. Buddha gave the way how to uproot latent dormant form of defilements by practicing knowledge, practicing wisdom. So the person who practices accordingly to the teaching given, the person who walks the path that has been guided, is the person who bears the Dhamma, is the person who bears the Dhamma practice. The person who attains path and fruition knowledge, the person who has realized the cessation by practicing systematically according to the guidance given, is called the person who bears the Dhamma, who practices the Dhamma. In this way, one should practice systematically according to the guidance given, so that one attains magga phala jnana, path and fruition knowledge, and one realizes nibbana. The person who practices systematically, who attains magga phala jnana, path and fruition knowledge, and who attains nibbana, is the bearer of the Dhamma. In order to become the bearer of the Dhamma, one should practice systematically according to the guidance given. One should practice accurately and effectively, so that one becomes the person who bears the Dhamma. One should practice the Dhamma so that one gains benefit, and one should make use of the benefit. There are 4 parts of practicing the Dhamma. The first one is one should learn the correct method of practice. The second, one should practice the Dhamma accordingly. And the third is one gains benefit by practicing the Dhamma. And the fourth, one can make use of the benefits gained through the Dhamma. One should practice sila, samadhi, panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom, so that one will be blameless, faultless, pure, clean, gentle, cultured, away from suffering. So in order to reach to this stage, one should learn the correct method of practice. There are 2 kinds of learning. Learning by listening and also discussion. Listening or reading from books and discussing about the Dhamma. Before one comes to practice, one should listen to the instruction, the correct method of practice, or one should learn through books how to practice. And during the practice, one should discuss with the meditation teacher. One should ask what she is not clear about the practice, so that the teacher can guide the way, the teacher can rectify the yogi's weaknesses. So in this way, the interviews are set up so that yogis can discuss his or her experience with the meditation teacher. So one should learn the correct method of practice. If one does not know the correct method of practice, one will be inferior. By learning the correct method of practice, one knows the method, and thus the Dhamma uplifts the person who learns the Dhamma. And one should practice according to the guidance given, according to the correct method. By practicing sila, one's body and speech will become pure, clean, gentle, and cultured. One should refrain from physical, verbal, misconduct by practicing sila so that one's body and speech will become pure, clean, gentle, and cultured. One should control oneself, and one gains control of oneself. And one does not hurt others. One also has the ability of not hurting others. In this way, one's life becomes beautiful and lovable. In this way, by practicing the Dhamma, one gains the Dhamma, one bears the Dhamma. Whenever one thinks of oneself, one feels satisfied. So in this way, there will be no remorse or regret as the person practices the Dhamma. By practicing the Sila, one's body and speech will become pure, clean, gentle, and lovable. By practicing Samadhi, then one's mind becomes calm and collected. By noting the presently arising object with aim and effort, the mind becomes calm and collected and unified. And one practices with Viriya Sati Samadhi. One exerts effort in the practice so that there is sustained mindfulness and the mind falls calm and collected on the object. And thus the person comes to know the true nature of the object. In this way, one's mind becomes pure, clean, and gentle, and one gains this through the practice. By practicing diligently, one's mind will be calm and collected. When the mind falls calm and collected on the object, the person discerns mind and matter, cause and effect, and the person develops knowledge stage by stage. By developing knowledge, one removes wrong view of atta. One also removes the wrong view of permanent good and self. In this way, the person removes this wrong view and clinging, and such kilesa defilements have no chance to arise when the person develops knowledge. By practicing, one develops Vipassana knowledge, and finally, when one's knowledge becomes matured, one finally realizes Ariya Magga Jnana, path knowledge, and one attains cessation. One can gain Magga Phala Jnana, path and fruition knowledge through practicing Vipassana practice. By attaining Magga Phala Jnana, by attaining path and fruition knowledge, by attaining cessation, one gains the benefit of practice. So it is not just enough just to learn the method, but one should practice accordingly so that one reaches the stage of gaining path and fruition knowledge, and thus one attains Nibbana. By practicing to the stage one attains Magga Phala Jnana, to the stage one attains path and fruition knowledge, and to attain Nibbana, the Dhamma uplifts and protects the person. One uplifts one's life by attaining Magga Phala Jnana, by attaining path and fruition knowledge. In this way, one should remove avijja, ignorance, not knowing the true method of practice. And also, one should learn the correct method from listening, discussing, reading the books, and one should practice accordingly. By practicing accordingly to the instruction, one also removes avijja, ignorance. And one should remove these two kinds of avijja by practicing. And Saraji will continue to explain the next day. Sadhu, 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 sadhu.